The last couple of months that I have been strictly at home due to the pandemic has definitely made me stir crazy, especially with having to keep the air on 24/7 and having to keep the windows closed due to that. But one way that I have been feeling better is by going on walks frequently throughout the day. I usually go for a walk almost first thing after I wake up, and many animals are out during this time. One in particular are rabbits. While out there, I noticed a behavior that was interesting among them. The larger the rabbit, the more they were fine with me walking by them, or the less distance they ran from me. I noticed 3 different sizes, small, medium, large, and I equated this to age. I noticed that the older they are, the more experience they seem to have with humans. I came to find out that this behavior is called human tolerance, and it is happening with species all around the world. Many people have seen it in cities where there are pigeons, sparrows, raccoons, in the case of Australia, ibis, and they're everywhere, and they barely bat an eye at humans who come within feet of them. This raises 2 questions to me. Why do some species have more tolerance than others? And what impacts do this have on a species? These 2 questions are what I intend to try to answer today. To answer these questions, I am focusing on a research paper from 2015 titled Increased Tolerance to Humans Among Disturbed Wildlife. Overall, birds, mammals, and lizards have the same capacity for human tolerance as they equally become more tolerant of humans as we disturb them more. So, the more humans, the more tolerance. Birds will end up being the primary focus here, as it is a lot easier to explain this topic with the data scientists have collected on them. Characteristics looked at were habitat contrast, body mass, clutch size, and diet. A general assessment was made for each characteristic. Birds with habitats in similar areas flee quicker than those in habitats that differ vastly. Larger birds are more tolerant than smaller ones. Birds that lay more eggs flee more than those that lay fewer. And herbivores/omnivores are more tolerant of humans than carnivores. These aren't set in stone, and there are more factors, even from these, that can change the tolerance birds have towards humans, but we will get to those other factors in a bit. Habitat contrast is when looking at a habitat with high human disturbance versus low human disturbance and comparing the tolerances. So essentially, when looking at, say, a rural versus suburban area, there's a trend towards more human tolerance. Yet, when looking at national parks with high versus low human activity spots, species tend to be less tolerant of humans. There isn't clear data to suggest why this is the case, but it could be due to habitats of similar areas having hot zones. So birds who wouldn't live in urban areas will naturally have less tolerance to humans and avoid those hot spots. Body mass is a huge factor in human tolerance. In the case of birds, the bigger, the more tolerance it has for humans. Trends for other animals tend to be different, but the explanation for birds is that fleeing and flight are very energy expensive. Unnecessary fleeing can waste huge amounts of energy and could lead to death or increased foraging. Animals have to weigh the pros and cons of fleeing each time a situation comes up, and larger birds might have more cognitive abilities to judge these situations better. These birds are also less likely to be hunted, so if there is more frequent contact with humans that are harmless, they will take that into consideration as well. The judgment of fleeing versus not also spills over to the data that birds with smaller clutches are more tolerant of humans. Birds with fewer eggs tend to also lay them less frequently. This gives them a greater sense of responsibility and investment for their offspring. If they leave their eggs unnecessarily, then it severely harms their reproductive chances. The last big characteristic is diet. Herbivores and omnivores are more tolerant of humans than carnivores, and this is due to the extra factors that carnivores rely on. If their prey is sensitive to human disturbance, then carnivores will go where their prey goes. Another interesting one that I hadn't thought of was the behavior of tracking movement. Carnivores are very sensitive to movement and respond accordingly. With humans constantly moving and having cars, bikes, boats, etc., it can tire out birds and make them less effective at hunting prey. Now back to the other factors that impact human tolerance. A big one is the actual type of habitat, including habitat cover. In my region alone, there are many large open stretches of land in lawns, parks, apartments, mall grounds. Animals naturally adapted to large uncovered areas usually are better with tolerating humans. Deer are a great example of this. The state where I grew up had countless signs for deer crossing roads. It isn't uncommon to see them on large lawns or in parks where humans frequented. They tended to also follow the flows of human traffic, usually active earlier in the morning or later at night to avoid huge flows. But there are places like Nara Park in Japan that have over 1,000 deer. You can go up and feed them like it's nothing. They can even perform small actions for food. This also extends to habitats having more cover. Animals can be more tolerant of humans if they have places to flee to. Birds can flee from humans to a nearby tree or bush where they feel safe, but they can also save their energy and not flee if they are already in a tree, a high bush, or on a rooftop, lamppost, or even a power line. Now back to those other factors I mentioned earlier. The study mentions that there are at least 3 mechanisms that can explain human tolerance in animals. One is personality types, where those that are more bold can more easily settle in a high human disturbance zone compared to shy individuals. This can make bold individuals more prevalent in a population experiencing increased human disturbance. Looking at you, seagulls. The second factor is habituation. This is the formation of a habit. Essentially, if a human performs the same action over and over, like walking on only the sidewalk, animals form an habit-like behavior. Humans are on the sidewalk, I don't have to run. But the second a human deviates from this and, say, walks on the grass, it will re-elicit fear patterns and flee or attack. So if you go hiking or something and decide to step off the path, don't think that an animal that is fine with you while you were on the path won't respond adversely when you leave it. The last factor is local adaptation. And this leads into the second question I asked earlier. What impacts does human tolerance have on a species? Local adaptation is when populations of species evolve to be more suited to their local environments compared to the species evolving as a whole. An example of this are cliff swallows. As their name suggests, they live on cliff sides, but as humans move into their territory, they are finding more creative places to live, like the undersides of bridges for one population in Nebraska. Millions of birds each year die by vehicle collisions, and these cliff swallows are no exception. But scientists over 30 years have discovered that this population is evolving to have shorter, sleeker wings so they can better maneuver through the traffic. Species with human tolerance use local adaptation, which helps species to survive by allowing each population to adapt to their specific environments. Human tolerance in general helps a species to thrive by allowing them to coexist with humans. This also allows us to study and understand the constraints of tolerance. Also, how to make it easier for species less tolerant, and what species currently are likely to be tolerant. However, there are consequences to human tolerance. Poaching, especially for bigger creatures like birds, is a serious issue. If we are to help species become more tolerant of humans, then we need to be stricter and watchful of poaching, as those species then become more vulnerable to hunting. This is an ever-growing topic, and as humans expand, species must adapt or die. We need to help in this endeavor, and understanding tolerance is a huge step for humans and other species to coexist. Thank you all so much for watching. This was the first of many different videos that I plan on doing. I will still do gaming related videos, but I wanted to experiment a bit. So let me know down in the comments what you thought of this. As always, the links to the articles I used are down in the description. So if you liked the video, consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, click subscribe and hit that bell icon if you want to know when I post a new video. I post every other Saturday. See ya then!